Welcome to Taiwan Report News Brief, news and analysis from Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith. Up today on the program, the TPP is starting to show their colors. The Navy coronavirus scandal is getting ever more embarrassing. Yet another GDP forecast shows no one has a clue. And is the PRC making a move on diplomatic partner Paraguay? Sz-hui thinks maybe. The Pope snubs Taiwan in favor of China. And finally, YouTube punishes Tao kids. But of course, up first is the coronavirus. There's one more case, also from the Navy ship, coronavirus outbreak. So we're going to start with the Taipei Times. The headline reads, "New incentives aim to boost lending." The government yesterday unveiled incentives for private banks in the hopes they would join state-run lenders in bailing out business affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. A deposit that banks are required to make to hedge against bad debts has been lowered from 1% to 0.5% of total accounts receivable. That would allow the nation's banks to save approximately $1 billion in such deposits. The Commission has also set aside 180 billion NT dollars, or 2%, of a deposit insurance reserve fund to reward banks that can help their clients secure loans from the central bank fund. Continuing with the theme in Focus Taiwan, government targets 900,000 relief payments by weekend premiere. About 900,000 people around Taiwan will have received relief payments from the government by the end of the week, Premier Su Tseng said Wednesday. They include 710,000 low and middle-income households and underprivileged people who will have a monthly subsidy of 1,500 NT remitted directly to their accounts and have already received payments for April, Su said at a press event on the execution of the government's relief and revitalization plans amid the coronavirus pandemic. In addition, 58,000 of 100,000 taxi and tourist coach drivers around the nation eligible for a monthly wage subsidy of 10,000 NT received payments this week, according to Su. These payments will be issued for 3 months to those whose livelihoods have been hit hardest by the pandemic, which has resulted in more than 171,000 fatalities worldwide. Moreover, 10% of the 1 million self-employed workers who have joined the Labor Insurance Fund and have an insured monthly salary of under 24,000 NT will receive a single one-time payment of 30,000 NT by the end of the week, Su said. As for employers of pandemic-stricken businesses who are eligible for a government wage subsidy that makes up to 40% of their monthly wage, Su said 37,000 will start receiving payments this week for a total of 3 months. Now, the Premier described these payments as pre-deployments for relief and revitalization work and emphasized that the relief payments target those most in need, not the entire population. In Focus Taiwan, Taiwan's jobless rate edges up in March. Taiwan's unemployment rate increased slightly in March due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. The Directorate General of Budget Accounting and Statistics said Wednesday. The jobless rate showed a 0.2% rise in March from a month earlier to 3.72%, but after seasonal adjustments, it was 3.76%, a monthly increase of 0.6 percentage points, and the highest since May. Last May, I should say. So overall, we're doing so far. However, these numbers are likely to increase. Companies like Baochun have recently announced that they are going to be furloughing workers if they can get that to agree with the union. Plus, also, there's a lot more people not only furloughed or having their salaries docked, which it looks like China Airlines will be doing. Moving on to the Taipei Times. Now, the reason I bring up this article, the headline reads, "TPP calls for landlords to reduce outrageous rents." The reason this article is here is that I'm bringing it up is because at this point, we're still trying to figure out what exactly the TPP is about. They're the third largest political party in the legislature right now. They're headed by Ko Wen-je, but their whole thing is good governance, good governance, good governance, which is essentially apple pie and mom. No political party is against these things. They finally came out with a cross-strait policy toward China, and it sounded pretty much like Tsai Ing-wen. So they're apparently fairly centrist there. So what do they stand for? Because they haven't been coming out with any proposals that are particularly controversial. This probably is not terribly controversial either, but at least we're seeing some of the things that they're starting to focus on. Now, the Taiwan People's Party lawmakers yesterday urged landlords nationwide to reduce their rents amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it goes on about how low-income families have struggled, and they talk about how the central and local governments have begun to lower rent for their tenants. Now, landlords should sympathize with tenants and reduce or delay rent payments, the party said. Tsui Mama Foundation for Housing and Community Services CEO Liu Pingyi said that for most tenants, rent is their largest expense, consuming about 30 to 50% of their income. As a result, when problems with their jobs arise, rent becomes a heavy burden, he said. Liu echoed the party's call for landlords to lower rent for tenants from a philanthropic perspective. It would not be easy for landlords to find new tenants for their properties under the current situation, should existing ones leave because they cannot pay the full rent, he said. Instead of spending months without rental income, landlords might as well cut rent by 20 to 30%, he added. Now, this is actually interesting, and it actually talks to a common phenomenon I've seen here with small business owners, particularly restaurant owners. If the restaurant starts doing well, smart landlords tend to work with them, maybe raise the rent a little bit over time. But you get these landlords who see a restaurant doing well and then raise the rent dramatically as soon as the lease is up. And what ends up happening is it means that the restaurant loses a ton of money, and then they sit around not collecting rent for 6 months, 8 months, because they're trying to get that high rent. So they end up losing a lot of money over the long term because they lose out easily half a year or more worth of rent. Quite often they're just cutting off their nose to spite their face. But all right, continuing on with the article, TPP legislator Lai Xiangling said that the government should set up a platform to help tenants struggling to pay rent due to an increase in or loss of income negotiate rent deferrals with their landlords. It should also ensure that when it lowers rent for businesses operating on publicly owned real estate, these cuts are extended to the business's subtenants. Well, that's just rational. All right, moving on again in the Taipei Times. Tsai orders military to probe for negligence on ship. The presidential office yesterday called on the military to thoroughly investigate and find those responsible for a cluster of at least 27, that's now 28, COVID-19 cases on a Navy ship. The President Tsai has ordered the Ministry of National Defense to undertake a complete internal investigation as soon as possible to determine whether it was negligence that contributed to the outbreak. Now, moving on here, it says Chang made the comments after lawmakers across party lines raised concern about speculation that the military had tried to conceal the outbreak. On Monday, Deputy Minister of Defense Zhang Zheping defended the decision to conduct the visit to Palau, saying that the Goodwill trip was an important annual mission by the Navy. It was also crucial for the training of Navy personnel and cadets, as well as to promote closer ties with Taiwan's diplomatic allies. Now, a political science professor questioned on Facebook why the flotilla set out on March 5th after the disease had been designated by WHO as a public health emergency of international concern. It is a little weird that they went out at that time while the borders were all being shut. Now, moving on a little bit further down, KMT lawmaker Sz-hui, a retired lieutenant general, said that as the mission was part of Taiwan's defense diplomacy, the president must have known about it and would have had the final say on whether it could proceed. He's actually got a point there. That's a good question. The last thing Tsai should do is say that she is livid about the cluster infection, Wu said, adding that instead she should stabilize the morale of the nation's armed forces by first taking care of the sick personnel and their families. This is pretty unusual, but I have to say it, this time I agree with him. Continuing with the theme in Focus Taiwan, Rear Admiral fails to report all fever cases on COVID-19 infected ship. This was mentioned in yesterday's show, but it goes into a bit more detail. The former commander of a Navy flotilla on which a cluster of COVID-19 infections has occurred admitted to lawmakers on Wednesday he did not report back to his superiors all the fever cases aboard his ships during their month-long cruise as retired. Rear Admiral Chen Sz-hui, former head of the Republic of China Navy's Friendship Fleet, however, defended the decision, saying that he did not do so because the medical officer had already ruled that many of the cases were common colds and not suspected COVID-19 cases. He therefore decided to continue to carry out the goodwill mission to Palau, one of the nation's Pacific allies. Chen insisted he would never have deliberately concealed information if he knew there were suspected COVID-19 patients aboard the three-ship flotilla that visited Palau from March 12th to 15th. He apologized to all 744 flotilla members and their families. Moving on to Focus Taiwan again, Tsai apologizes for COVID-19 cluster infection on the Navy's ship. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday apologized for the handling of the COVID-19 cluster on board a naval ship, saying that as Commander-in-Chief, she holds ultimate responsibility for the military. She goes on to say, as Commander-in-Chief, the military's business is my business. And she goes on to say that the military has done much to bolster Taiwan's epidemic prevention efforts, but it handled this case badly. Now, she says also, we will not attempt to evade responsibility for this, she said. Okay, this is good. She is not dodging this. She's not making excuses. And she is acknowledging her role as the head of the military. That's a strong, practical leader. And that sort of behavior means that they'll get over this crisis faster rather than later. Taipei Times, I hear some economic news. Fitch lowers Taiwan GDP growth forecast to 0.3%. So at this point, we've got estimates for Taiwan's growth this year from negative 4% all the way to positive 1.8%. In other words, this is probably the biggest spread I've ever seen in Taiwan. I could be wrong, but it's the biggest one I seem to recall. In other words, nobody has any idea. The estimates are so wildly disparate. Normally, most estimates are usually within 1 percentage point, with most of them clustering around a few decimal points within each other. But this is a huge range, almost 6 points. All right, Seeking Alpha. The headline is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company losing its process leadership to Intel. Quoting from their summary, TSM, or TSMC is what's normally used, revealed its initial 3-nanometer process specs for 2023. They're underwhelming. N3 has 1.7 higher density on a 2.5-year cadence, since Intel 7 and NM has 2 to 2.4 higher density on a 2-year cadence. Intel is catching up. This article is very, very much in depth. I recommend reading it if you can understand what's going on. I more or less followed along with it. But one of the biggest concerns here is TSMC maintains FinFET, which means no GAA until 2024-2025, which Samsung will ship in 2022, Intel in late 2023. In other words, GAA is essentially the next generation, which, from what I understand, and again, I'm not an engineer here, essentially what they're doing is that they're starting to scale more three-dimensionally, which means that they can get more density on the chips. And TSMC, which until recently has been ahead of all of its competitors, it seems that they're going to be coming out with the next, what most people consider here the next generation, slower than both Intel and Samsung. Moving on to Now News. This is a local news report. And we're back again to Sz-hui. Now, he says that China has sent 41,000 tons of medical supplies to Paraguay. However, Taiwan has only sent 100,000 face masks, which he calls too little. Now, of course, Paraguay is one of Taiwan's few, or one of 15 diplomatic partners in the world. So he seems to be suggesting here that the PRC may be making a move on diplomatic ties with Paraguay. Paraguay, I believe, is the biggest country left to diplomatically recognize Taiwan. Moving on to live site news. The headline reads, Cardinal Burke criticizes Vatican for thanking China but not Taiwan. Cardinal Raymond Burke has criticized the Holy See for publicly thanking Communist China for its generosity, but remaining silent about Taiwan's after both nations donated much-needed medical supplies to the Vatican. Now, this is important here. The Vatican is one of the few entities that diplomatically recognizes Taiwan. So this is a real slap in the face. Now, moving on with the article. Something is badly wrong, is the quote, with China seemingly enjoying a place of privilege with the Vatican, Burke told The Australian. The Holy See made a point to praise the People's Republic of China for sending masks and medical equipment to the Vatican, while it has not acknowledged in any public way the generous help received from Taiwan, observed the Vatican-based American cardinal. Now, the slight comes amid news that Pope Francis will soon visit Wuhan, the city in China where the coronavirus most likely originated, according to the Italian newspaper La Verità. And on to the Taipei Times. The headline reads, YouTube removes Tao dance video. YouTube has deleted a video showing Tao elementary school students on Orchid Island, or Lanyu, dancing in traditional attire after it was erroneously flagged for obscenity, the children's teacher said yesterday. Yayu Elementary School teacher Yen said that when he logged into the school's YouTube account recently, he was greeted with a message saying that a video he uploaded in 2018 of the children performing a Tao dance to mark the construction of a new classroom had been removed. The video is flagged by a user and after a review by YouTube staff was found to have breached the platform's community standards, the message read. Yen said the misunderstanding likely stemmed from the Tao clothing worn by the children in the video. Traditional clothing for Tao males is a cloth tied around the lower body in a manner resembling a modern-day thong, but does not carry any of the implications of a thong in Tao culture. Now, this group is called the Flying Fish, and this is not the first time they've had controversy. The school's performance troupe performed at Poland's 27 International Children's Arts Festival last year. At the festival's opening ceremony, the troupe refused to carry China's national flag as requested and instead carried Taiwan's national flag when entering the arena, Yen said, adding that the move gained them praise from Taiwanese. Quote, our culture on Orchid Island is beautiful and unique. These children put a great deal of effort into their dances. What is the problem, Yen said. He has contacted YouTube about the misunderstanding, but has yet to receive a reply. The thong-style attire of the Tao is an element of the people's seafaring culture. And that's it for today's report. All the English language articles will be up on Taiwan Report, which the URL is report.tw. Be sure to sign up for your favorite podcast service and subscribe to us on YouTube. Look forward to tomorrow.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。